Hi, this is Dr. Kate Shanahan with another episode of Bad Medicine, and I'm here today with my husband.
How you doing, everybody? This is Luke.
And we're going to talk a little bit about dementia because we have a gentleman running for president, Joe Biden, who is making everybody think that he's on the way to getting dementia, and that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about what I think is happening with him, not just him, but also kind of compare him to Trump, who a lot of folks have been wondering about his mental state as well. We've been watching him for 4 years now, pretty closely. So a really great example of what's worrisome about Biden. We have it on recording here.
Oh, excellent. Let's. Okay, this is from very recently an interview on CBS. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, this is from the CBS interview, and actually it's as recorded by Rolling Stone. Matt Taibbi on Useful Idiots, their podcast, and we're doing this one because they have the longest sequence that we could find. It seemed like some of the other news organizations are cutting him off.
It's weird. They're clipping the part where he really kind of loses it.
Yeah.
Which is suspect.
So there's a little bit of extra laughter, right? Because the hosts themselves are giggling their heads off.
Let's
here.
have a listen.
It's been a while since we brought you one of those. So if we could just go down to the to that videotape and watch this interaction between Biden and a reporter.
Mr. Vice President, your opponent in this election, President Trump, has made your mental state a campaign topic. And when asked in June if you've been tested for cognitive decline, you've responded that you're constantly tested in effect because you're in situations like this on the campaign trail. But please clarify specifically, have you taken a cognitive
test? No, I haven't taken a test. Why the hell would I take a test? Come on, man. That's like saying before you got in this program, you take a test where you're taking cocaine or not. What do you think, huh? Are you a junkie?
What do you say to President Trump, who brags about his test and makes your mental state an issue for voters?
So there Biden laughs.
Well,
inappropriately.
If he can't figure out the difference between an elephant and a lion, I don't know what the hell he's talking about. Did you watch that? Look, come on, man. I know you're trying to goad me, but I mean, I'm so forward-looking to have an opportunity to sit with the president or stand with the president in debates. There can be plenty of time. And by the way, as I joke with him, I shouldn't say it. I'm going to say something I don't.
Stops himself from saying something inappropriate.
Anyway, I am very willing to let the American public judge my physical and mental my physical as well as my mental fitness, and to make a judgment about who I am.
Okay. Oh my. Okay.
That's good.
Right. So there's a lot. There's a lot
to unpack
there. Yeah. So
he took
clearly,
that second fitness at a running start and still couldn't bust through that window.
I mean, he's really, really struggling, and it's painful. You said it's painful.
Yeah, we were talking earlier. It's hard. It's
But you compare that to Trump, right? So for some reason, here's Trump now. The same day, actually, yesterday, I think, or pretty much the same day.
Shifting production to Thailand and to Vietnam. It was 4 or 5 years ago. This place was a disaster. In 2017, Whirlpool won relief from the ITC once again. Once more, your foreign competitors moved their factories to prevent the level
Where's that second
playing
Thailand?
It's coming.
and to avoid liability. Shifting production to Thailand and to Vietnam. Thailand and Vietnam.
Oh, fix it. All right.
So at least he realized, what was going on there, and he's actually
Is he
reading
thinking
from
about Kentucky Fried Chicken or women? Thailand.
He just can't get his head above the belt. But
I think both are floating above his head. It's chicken. He's thinking, I could eat chicken. I do a terrible Trump. Wow, with a beautiful woman. Anyway.
Obviously, he thinks more about food and women than he does about countries.
I think that's the point.
But I mean, he's also reading from a teleprompter, so he has that advantage there. But here's another.
Disadvantage.
Yeah, I guess. Now here's another example, though. This is from Politico magazine reporting on back in March of 2020 on something that Trump said.
Do you want to do
a
your
little
best
bit
Trump
before that?
This is a while back.
Okay,
so
here
you're gonna try to do Trump.
I'll
Let's
try.
hear your Trump.
Hillary wanted to put up wind. If you if you have a windmill anywhere near your house, congratulations. Your house just went down 75% of value. And they say the noise causes cancer. You tell me that one, okay? Roar! Roar! You know, the thing makes it's so noisy. And of course, it's like a graveyard for birds. If you love birds, you'd never want to walk under a windmill because it's very sad sight. It's like a cemetery.
Okay.
So that's like.
There was a little Christian walking in there.
Yeah, so
it's very sad. I don't know.
Okay, so bad impersonation.
No, that's good.
Aside,
It was excellent.
It's a lot more comic, right? I mean, because he's trying to be funny, and they don't say anything about whether or not he was laughing, but I don't think he probably was, right? But Joe Biden, he seemed just confused, and he was struggling in a different way.
And there's a look of him. There's a look. A friend of mine who's done some MMA stuff, and he said when a guy gets punched real hard in the ring and he's trying, it's a weird look because the look is, I'm not here, I just got my bell rung, but it's also a panicked look like, but I can't let the other guy know that.
Right, and the other thing that's happening with Trump versus Biden is that we're a lot more familiar with Trump, and we're almost kind of like bought into the way his brain works now after 4 years. Sure. So we can maybe overlook things a little bit, or we kind of understand his thought patterns a little bit, and we know he's just
tell me, as a doctor,
extremely expressive.
As a physician, what are some of I was thinking that you could use humor as a cover for so a lot of early onset dementia patients start to become sexually inappropriate or make sexually inappropriate comments, for example, right? Is that typical, or am I completely off base there? Sounds like I'm off base.
Well, that's inappropriateness is a judgment, and that's different than what happens early on.
Oh.
So there's different facets of the mind, right? And so we'll talk about that.
Oh, excellent. So we're going to get into that.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk, okay.
But what I wanted to do first, before we get into like what is dementia, what's mild cognitive impairment, why did Joe Biden bring up that if he doesn't know the difference between a camel and an elephant, he's referring to a cognitive test.
Okay, let's get into this.
So, well, I wanted to first, actually, here it is, right here. So so he's referring to something called the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, which is meant to test for dementia. Dementia is a very advanced form of brain dysfunction.
Okay.
When somebody has dementia, the definition includes they are no longer able to function independently.
Oh.
So we're not talking about just not fit to run a country or to be in a room with leaders or to have their finger on the button, as they used to say in the 90s.
Yeah.
But we're talking about somebody who doesn't know where the button is on the microwave. So
or can
much
start
more
a fire in the house like Tony Soprano's mom.
They're potentially a danger to themselves.
They're on fire!
Right.
The wall's turning black!
So the Montreal Cognitive Assessment Tool does have a picture of a camel, a rhinoceros, and a lion on it.
I can tell the difference.
So that isn't really a great test to be giving a president. So when Trump brags about how he passed this test with flying colors, it's not a lot to brag about. It's kind of bragging like that you know your colors, or you can point to your nose when the doctor asks you where's your nose. So
that's a great, if I may, I think that's a pretty good comparison, a DUI test in terms of I passed the DUI test, I can be president.
I was actually thinking of the, what you add, 3-year-olds, and do they know their body parts?
Oh, okay.
So, but yeah, right.
But very low bar.
Very low bar. So let's talk, I want to talk just a little bit about the spectrum of brain, going from a functioning brain to dementia. And in between there, we have something called mild cognitive impairment.
That's what I got.
That's part of the spectrum. From time to time, everyone has mild cognitive impairment, right? Like when you're super tired,
super sick.
Yeah, yes.
Febrile.
But this isn't talking about a metabolic state or like a temporary thing.
Right.
Mild cognitive impairment means you're really not always on, you're almost not ever on. You're never your best self anymore. You might be some days, but you might
very rare.
You might fluctuate down to where you just can't quite. You're not yourself anymore.
Right.
And so
this is something they're saying with people. Some people with COVID are saying months out. I just saw an article that 55% of people who are long haulers, which I guess means they've had symptoms for months sometimes, But I read another article about I think it was a neuroscientist who was 6 months out and said, I'm not quite myself anymore. So I just bring that up because anyone who has ever experienced, where they don't feel right, it is scary.
Well, when you have a fever, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times people don't really remember that, or if you've ever woken up a little bit early from a procedure and
like in the hospital.
Yeah, you're confused.
Sure.
Or, actually, very often we don't remember that stuff, but other people describing it might be really scared at what we're saying and doing.
Yeah, it's
or
like
other,
what were you
other people
talking
watching
about?
it. I mean,
You said that the marshmallow dragon was taking your windmill away. Do you remember saying that? And you're like, I said what?
Right,
Yeah.
and if you didn't know better, if you didn't know that it was temporary, if you didn't know that it's not a result of the surgery, but a result of the anesthetic
Anesthesia.
not quite having worn off, you might be really scared that they're
Sure.
never going to be the
Yeah,
same again.
no kidding, right?
So what we're seeing with Biden. I wanted to kind of compare the mental functioning of Trump versus Biden.
Yeah, and later on we're going to say a little bit also about Clinton, right? Maybe we can do that now. Let's just recently Clinton was at John Lewis's funeral, and he was a little bit inappropriate.
Sure.
And just to cover this just briefly now, we can get back into it later. But with Bill Clinton, when he had that bypass surgery, can you talk about that just a little bit? And then we can get back into the dimension between Trump and
right.
the
So a
other
lot
guy.
of folks, Bill Clinton had a heart attack, and then he had
I had a brain
what
fart.
was the joke?
Me being cognitively impaired.
So in the early 2000s, Bill Clinton had a heart attack, then he had bypass surgery or heart attack scare, I can't remember.
Yeah.
And so the bypass surgery, during bypass surgery, the blood, it's called bypass surgery because they put your circulatory system through a machine instead of your heart. So they're bypassing the heart, right? So your heart has to stop beating for a little bit, and you're put on the bypass machine, and then when they hook you back up to your heart again, something pretty bad happens. So they have to have your heart stop beating
Right.
because they're trying to do very delicate
Sure,
surgery
of
on
course.
it with little arteries and little
Yeah,
tiny
yeah,
sutures. And so the heart stops. And when they restart the heart, because the blood that was left over in the heart is not totally flushed out,
Sure.
there's little tiny blood clots. And when you start the heart again,
Rev up the
those
engine.
little bitty blood clots go to your
Yeah.
brain, and you have little bitty strokes all over your brain.
Right.
And we're talking like a lot. They call it a shower, a thrombotic shower.
Wow.
And you can hear this
Yeah,
happening.
when you put the scope,
If you put some kind of a
an
recording
ultrasound
device.
I think it's on the carotid, or
No, it's not. I think it's just like a really good microphone on the head.
Yeah.
And they actually hear like little popping, like popcorn, going off all over your brain
Yeah.
for a good 10 seconds. So that's every single one of those popping
mini
sounds,
stroke.
brrrr, like that fast, is a miniature stroke. And so doctors have a name for it. They call it a bypass brain or pump head. And it's
That's a great band, by the way. I saw them with Cop Shoot Cop in Iowa City. They were crazy. Blues Explosion. But Pumphead was... anyway, go ahead.
You're funnier than me.
Yeah.
They'll
be the judge of that. Your friend Michael Yo says I'm not funny at all.
Yeah. Well, he's a comedian. So he has a higher bar.
Oh, so he was being funny by saying I'm not funny? Is that what you're... That's a sweet
Possibly.
interpretation. I appreciate that. Yeah. Oh, you're right. He was probably just making a joke.
Yeah.
When he said
he was
your
making a
husband is entirely unfunny.
Yeah.
He was actually making
a point
making
of
him
saying
funny.
how unfunny you were. So what was I getting at? Oh, yeah. So to Pumphead. So they've done IQ tests before and after, and other cognitive tests, and in general, there's a much worse performance for every single person who's been on bypass afterwards. Many people recover, not all recover fully. Somewhere around 40% don't recover at all within a year. Bill Clinton did recover somewhat. And part of this pump head thing is that you recover or you don't, but you're stable after about a year.
Okay.
There's not a continued decline. That's not part of it.
Okay, so we're making a comparison to bring it back to the through line of this thing. We're making a comparison between three presidents, who all present with different kinds of cognitive impairment.
Right.
Could you tell me that you said at some point, not today, but you told me yesterday, there's 3 major ways to goof up the brain a bit.
How does this happen? How
3
do we?
categories.
Yeah, of dementia.
Of
right?
etiology.
Etiologies of dementia, right?
Which means the cause.
Now let me just tell you that the most common one, the most common form of dementia is Alzheimer's.
Okay.
The Alzheimer's, they don't really understand the cause. They do, though, understand that it has to do with oxidative stress or inflammation.
Okay.
And that's where I come in with, okay, well, why does that happen?
Like incredible, like more inflammation than you should have.
Right.
Often.
Why are some people so susceptible? Why and others
Well, it makes
not?
me think about that lung thing that's happened with COVID. Is crazy inflammatory response.
Exactly.
Not a good thing.
Yeah. So it's inflammation out of control.
So Alzheimer's is an inflammatory. Is this the one that they say is you could call it diabetes type 3, or is that?
Yeah, actually, Dr. David Perlmutter calls Alzheimer's diabetes type 3. Now that's tying it to the cause being insulin rather than inflammation.
Oh.
And so to me, that theory doesn't make as much sense.
Okay, let's go with your theory. Let's not get too deep in the weeds of what other people think.
Right. So so I think that inflammatory problems and oxidative stress, of course, come from your diet. When your diet is composed, as ours is, of 80% of your fat calories coming from seed oils and vegetable oils, which are all pro-inflammatory, going to promote oxidative stress.
You could basically call it the American vegetable oil diet or the seed oil diet. Yeah.
Exactly. At this point,
we're living off of it.
Right.
That's why we never talk about it. See, it makes perfect sense. That's why no one talks about what we live off anyway.
Well, we talk about it quite a lot.
We do. So, so Alzheimer's, an inflammatory disease that is pushed along by a horrible pro-inflammatory seed oil diet.
Right. And
so far I'm with you.
Yes. And so the cognitive declines in Alzheimer's disease seem to start years or even decades before somebody develops dementia.
Wow.
And so there's all kinds of crazy associations that
Let's not get into
point
it.
their fingers to.
Type 2. What? This is
the other type of dementia is
3 total.
called
so now
vascular.
2.
Yeah, vascular dementia.
VAD, vascular dementia.
Yes. So meaning like little strokes.
A bunch of accumulation of strokes over time.
Over time, and some of the strokes may not be symptomatic.
So it's a slow shower. It's a sprinkle.
It's very
It's
related.
like a delightful walk in the drizzling rain. That happens to eat your mind and identity. Doesn't sound very pleasant.
Right, and so, but that also, of course, people who've read my stuff know that strokes are also ultimately related to an inflammatory process. It's a different one.
Okay.
It's an inflammatory process in the blood vessels.
Okay.
Not so where Alzheimer's dementia is an inflammatory process in the cells of the brain themselves.
Oh, I see. That's a great distinction.
Right. So
that's a more global, comprehensive.
Yes, that's why you see brain shrinkage actually
Oh.
over years, because the cells have become so damaged that they don't function, and the connections between the cells that take up a good bulk of the brain is the dendrites that are the connections between one brain cell and another.
Yeah.
Those connections have died back. And so there's a lot less volume in the brain. And, of course, there's also some cells dying,
Right,
too, as
okay.
well. So that's why you actually literally see brain shrinkage, sometimes pretty significantly, like 10, 20, 30%.
And there's that
in
really cool
dementia.
scan that actually shows connections. What's that called?
That's called diffusion tensor imaging, and it's done with an MRI. And,
Yeah, that's really high tech.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I don't really understand what
Those
what
are
that's
so
really
cool
great
looking.
for.
It really shows you what a network of connections. You wouldn't think that
Yes.
this part of the brain is talking to this other part of the brain on the other side.
Yes, it's
the
used for
hemisphere.
understanding like how the brain works at this point, not so much for diagnosing problems. But so okay,
So
so
number
then
2
this
is a vascular issue,
a vascular issue.
also inflammatory based,
Right.
inflammation based.
And they're not mutually exclusive, right?
Right.
Obviously, if you have vegetable oil causing the vascular
Sure.
damage and the tiny little blood clots that way, and you have vegetable oil causing the cellular inflammation and cellular damage.
Very likely there's some overlap there.
Yeah, going to be both.
Type
right?
3.
So the third type is more tied to nutrient deficiency, and this is something that there isn't an official name for it. This is just kind of my own thing that I see happening a lot in folks who are on statins, especially if they are on a very low-fat diet or a vegan diet.
A combination of a vegan or low-fat diet with not a lot of healthy fats.
Right, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because we were talking about Bill Clinton. And
yeah, you want to get to the charts?
I want to make my point about Bill Clinton is that he kind of did get better after his bypass surgery.
Yeah, I remember that.
But then he seems to be getting worse again, and sometimes to the point where people say he looks like he doesn't know where he is.
He seems kind of drunk at the great John Lewis's funeral. He seemed not quite.
Or super tired, like he was going to fall over or something. Yeah. So now let's talk about the blood tests, right?
Okay.
Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah.
Now's a good time to talk about that.
Perfect.
Okay, so the blood tests of
three presidents and their blood,
or candidates. So first we have Joe Biden. Now, actually, we have access to Joe Biden's full physical, which I do want to talk about, but I want to jump right in first to the lipid panel.
Okay.
Because
just to mention offhand, you did get a look at also Obama's, and his looked really good to you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm going to talk.
We're going to get to. I'm sorry. So we have four presidents we get to look at. Or four guys.
Exactly. So jumping right to the most important part about Biden, to me, what stands out is his HDL is low. It's 36. Now he is on a cholesterol medication, and it's not clear. I don't know whether or not the cholesterol medication is playing a role in dropping his HDL, or if he were off a cholesterol medicine, if his HDL would still be low. But regardless, the number one reason I see HDL being low is vegetable oil consumption.
Okay.
And a cholesterol pill sometimes drives your HDL up oddly enough, right? And so I can explain that. But
can you just real quick?
So what the cholesterol pills do is they poison your liver's ability to make cholesterol.
Okay.
And when that happens, your cells become, it doesn't just poison your liver's ability, it poisons all of your body cells. And so those body cells that might have been getting deliveries of cholesterol from your liver, because they came from your diet, and your liver makes a huge amount of cholesterol all the time, it's really good at it. Your cells now aren't as good at it, and so they have to ask for cholesterol from the bloodstream. And what they do is they put up LDL receptors, low-density lipoprotein receptors, that will suck those LDL particles that are full of cholesterol from the bloodstream. So that's how the cholesterol-lowering pills really work to lower your blood cholesterol levels.
Okay, so
It's not because they're so great. It's not just because they poison your liver's ability to make it. It's because we don't. It's also mostly because of this LDL receptor effect, where your body is slurping them out of the bloodstream. Right.
Okay,
Yes.
got it.
So, how does that end up in raising your HDL? Honestly, I really don't know, but it might upregulate your brain cells or the other your cellulars trying to make cholesterol. The cells in the periphery of your body.
They can make cholesterol?
Yes, most cells in your body can actually make cholesterol. It's just that your liver's really good at it. It makes a lot.
And it specializes.
Yeah.
And the brain is composed of there's a lot of cholesterol in your brain.
Yes.
But by design, not by. That's a feature.
15% of your cholesterol by dry weight. 50% of your brain is by dry weight is cholesterol, and something like a quarter of all the cholesterol in your body is in your brain. So it's a huge amount. Jeez. Your brain really, really needs it. And so whether or not your cholesterol levels dropping is going to impact your brain.
Bottom line, how are you interpreting this Biden?
Well, I'm interpreting this as like
X-ray normal.
I wouldn't be surprised if he had dementia just based on his age and his HDL number being low, because to me that says, okay, this guy's probably consuming a lot of vegetable oils.
Okay.
And a high vegetable oil diet is, in my experience, almost 100% of the folks who eat a lot of vegetable oil, by the time they're 70, they are not functioning the way they were 20 years earlier.
Okay.
They're significantly different.
It's a great combination to injure your brain over decades in mid to later life, is a combination of cholesterol lowering medication and,
Yes.
and a bad diet without a lot of healthy fats and plenty of seed oil. Great. Good. Right? There's your recipe.
Yes. And so the other thing that's important on the lipid panel for Joe Biden here is that his triglycerides.
Is this why, I'm sorry to interrupt, is this why when people, say my grandma, your grandma's over 100, and she, was sharp as a tack. I don't know how she's doing now, but a lot of people remember their great grandparents and going, no, they were on it, man. You don't hear about that so much anymore. Is this because of the change in diet?
Yes.
I mean, you're not, just to understand the
yes.
impact of this, what you're literally, I just want to make sure we're clear here. You're literally saying this stuff that we're talking about with COVID and some of the reactions we're getting with lungs and people who we wouldn't ordinarily say have an underlying condition, yet have this incredible inflammatory response that is deadly or near deadly and leaves them, if not in the morgue, not feeling themselves for a long time. It's a big deal. And you're saying, well, guess what? More than any other single thing, in terms of, we should eat better, we should get in shape, all these sort of bromides that people toss out. And you're like, get the damn vegetable oil out of your body. That's going to be huge.
Yes.
And what we're seeing with Biden, talking backwards in Swahili, not making sense, trying to navigate his way out of a 7-Eleven with the aid of 15 flashlights and a security team. This is vegetable oil at work? Are we seeing a brain being riddled by vegetable oil?
That's what
is vegetable oil running for president of the United States?
It is. I mean, it's almost impossible.
President Canola?
It's almost impossible to age gracefully when your diet has been so hugely composed with vegetable oil. And so another indication that is possibly the case in Mr. Biden is that his triglyceride level is more than twice his HDL level. So his HDL is 36 and his triglycerides are 106. So that is associated with something called insulin resistance.
Insulin resistance.
Yes. And insulin resistance is a precursor to prediabetes, and it's a necessary precursor. When you are diabetic, you are insulin resistant.
That's the entry
but you
point
very
to diabetic.
often were insulin resistant decades before you were
Okay,
diagnosed.
so bottom line, what are you looking at here?
Well, another important thing I want to bring up with regard to the idea that Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes, his blood sugar average is extremely good. His hemoglobin A1C is how we measure blood sugar average. It's 5.1. So
the hemoglobin A1C is basically how much sugar is sticking to
your red blood cells, your
which
hemoglobin.
Which shows like kind of an average, like over time accumulation of.
Yeah,
okay,
it's a moving target average of your
you're
last 3
liking
months'
sugar.
blood sugar. And when it's 5 so we diagnose prediabetes when it's 5.6 or 5.7.
Okay.
5.1 is really good. I almost never see it under 4.
Oh.
So under 5, sorry.
5,
yeah. So
What's that?
so that's it's 5.1. So that's
Oh.
really good. So, and his weight is good, he's 178 pounds, for 5 foot, almost 6 feet tall. He's 5 foot, 11.65 inches. So
link this up to his brain state. Now, obviously, you're not making any kind of diagnosis, and if you were to treat him, or if you were to be in his care, you would run a whole battery of other tests, which we're not going to get into here. But based on the limited information you have and what you've observed with his behavior, and your experience with early onset dementia patients.
it's completely consistent with this is a guy who, if he were 50, I would say he's very likely to develop Alzheimer's.
You would
problems.
call it.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so
Can I ask you something? If there was a guy who's 50 there and he's there with his wife or his kid or his partner, could be a partner. Would you say, hey, look, I want to talk you into changing your diet, man? Like, what do you most? Would you bring that up and say, look, I'm not. Does your dad have dementia? Or have you seen dementia? No fun, bub. So would you use that as a tool to try to convince them get off the vegetable oil?
yeah, that's a really good tool. I mean, there's almost nothing that vegetable oil can't cause, right? So it's always, for me, it's always a matter of, well, what is this person going to be
Most afraid of?
most worried of? And it is often what runs in their family or what, somebody else has happened that's a friend of
For
theirs.
death, death sometimes is scarier for people than, impairment, and for others it's the other way around.
Right.
I mean, what's really scary is, really not being you. I mean, talk about people who are afraid of To me,
this is
dementia
up there
and
with
Alzheimer's
cancer.
is
This is up there with cancer.
Yeah. Okay.
It feels like a death sentence.
Okay, so anything else with this one, or should we move on to?
Yeah, so the only other thing is that his blood pressure is pretty good, but not great. So it's a 128. That's a pretty good number for the upper number of the blood pressure. I like to see it under 125, and the bottom number of his blood pressure is 84. So
I love what you told me that, so he's 128 over 84 at the time of the test, and you said something to me the other day I thought was stunning about
So
blood
80.
pressure.
Well, let's talk about the 84 number. So
Oh,
that should
great.
be 75 or lower.
Okay, that's
and when
the
it's a little
diastolic.
bit high, that's the diastolic. The lower one is the diastolic, which is what you're.
We don't
going-
need to get into that
Okay.
one. Go.
They
have the internet for that.
Why does blood pressure go up? Well,
Right.
for the longest time, I didn't really have a good answer because medical science hasn't come up with the answer. But I've come to, this is my hypothesis, that what's happening is you're not getting enough energy in either your brain or your kidney. And as an attempt to increase the energy delivery to both of those very important organs, the body works to increase the blood flow, right? And increasing the blood flow, you increase the blood pressure very often. You can squeeze the arteries harder, you can pump with a little more force in the heart, but the problem is lack of energy. It's not that there's something wrong with your blood vessels necessarily, and the problems come from the lack of energy, and that's really important, not the high pressure itself.
So what causes the bad energy problem?
Well, again, with the vegetable oil, because if you are if your body is full of vegetable oil, almost nothing in your body can work properly, and that includes just the very simple and necessary physiologic function of regulating your blood flow, making sure that enough blood is flowing to the areas of your body that are metabolically
You know,
active.
it's funny when you keep bringing up blood flow as being so. Oh, I just mentioned as a cool aside where you said you're not so much worried about blood pressure as in and of itself.
In and of
More
itself.
you're worried about it as a symptom of a larger metabolic distress brought on by years of vegetable oil consumption.
Right.
Which
Which is why it takes a long time for the blood pressure to normalize, because you're actually looking at, a lot of things have to get better before your blood pressure will fully normalize.
So in other words, in the inverse, as you don't like high blood pressure, in that it indicates a troubled. If someone has a very good blood pressure, you like that.
I really like
That's
that.
a really good sign of a healthy underlying metabolic system.
It's
at
one
work.
indicator. Yeah.
So you brought up this great thing. You said, but
It's not in and of itself. I mean, this is important to understand
Yeah.
that different people will have different metabolic susceptibilities, right? So somebody can be normal weight, but have really high blood pressure.
Right.
And like what they don't have is the tendency to gain weight. What they don't have is a lot of the stuff associated with weight gain, like
no, that's fine. I get it. The idea being,
Diabetes,
if you're
really. Like
what you're saying is if your
rapid
metabolism-
progression to
if your
diabetes.
metabolism's not working, it can hit you in another number of ways.
Right. Just
But
because one is good doesn't mean everything else
it
is
sounds to
good.
me though like you're saying it's more likely in terms of a marker for bad metabolism. It's more likely to hit your blood pressure than necessarily your weight. Oh, geez, I think I misused the word necessarily there. It's more likely either it is or not. More likely across a given a population to affect raise your blood pressure than it is to go after to make you gain weight.
Right, and that's the case with Joe Biden, right? And so then we'll
Perfect.
contrast him with the president, Trump, who has gained
The
weight.
giant orange peanut.
Yes, but doesn't
Marshmallow
I
peanut.
don't think he has like elevated blood pressure.
Let's take a look.
Yeah, so it's hard to find his results, but I don't remember seeing anything about his
It has a
blood
thing where you
pressure
can
being
click it, and then we
elevated.
clicked it, and it didn't have the
Yeah, they
the
were
actual
like
report, which is-
redacted or something like that. But what we're looking at with Trump is that his LDL cholesterol, and he's on a heavy dose of a cholesterol lowering medication. His LDL cholesterol is 143, and his good cholesterol, his HDL, is 70. Now, to me, that's kind of really important. So his HDL is significantly better than Joe Biden's. I do not know if that's because of the cholesterol medication, because like I mentioned, in
It
some
can have
people that will happen.
Right.
And
paradoxical effect.
so it's not clear to me that President Trump is avoiding vegetable oil, but I would put more money on Biden getting more vegetable oil and being more demented than Trump just based on this.
I see. Which is weird because he loves the photo op with him and his KFC and him and his McDonald's or whatever. But in reality, you're thinking, maybe the wonderful Filipino chef is treating him good.
Right. Yeah. So he lives in the White House, and he's got, when he's
no doubt he
home,
saw you at
he's
Bill
going to
Maher.
have
He's a big fan.
the better chefs. Oh yeah, I'm sure he's a big fan of Bill Maher.
Bill Maher.
I'm sure he read Deep Nutrition actually, when it first came out. But so the better chefs. So the White House gets elite level chefs, and the better chefs tend to use extra virgin olive oil or coconut oil, or they don't tend to use hydrogenated vegetable shortening. So my guess is that the quality of food that whereas that's served in the White House is better, and also Trump's been rich his whole life, so he's probably had personal chefs his whole life, and the best tasting food is going to be made with the healthier fats, not the vegetable oils, because they destroy flavor. And let's contrast now. Remember, Biden was vice president for 8 years, and he doesn't live in the White House. He lives in off-site in this, what is it called, Navy One or something like that?
Observatory, something or other.
Yeah, it's like a naval thing on a naval base, and my guess is they have like a military cook there, and so they're not going to be like the same elite level. I'm guessing he would be getting more of it for longer.
So
plus he's older.
Based on their cognition, as you have witnessed over the years and lately, and your experience in the past, and based on the results or the limited results we have about Trump's, but what we have here is useful to you to indicate, believe it or not, that giant tub of orange goo, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man with his finger on the button, declaring war over Twitter on occasion.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But based on his numbers and based on the fact that he can almost make sense from time to time, you would guess that maybe his diet is better than Biden. By the way, we don't have a dog in the fight here. We're just talking pure, objective.
Right, yes. His diet is better, and that his mental functioning has... Yeah, I think his mental functioning has probably declined because most people who are on the cholesterol medications, their mental functioning has declined. Right, because of that third kind of dementia, right? The lack of building blocks for the brain, lack of nutrients. Right, but I would say his mental functioning has declined less. That doesn't say anything. Part of mental decline involves something we always talk about it in terms of memory and memory tests. Memory is a much more concrete function of the brain. It's easier to test for because we just ask, do you remember what I just told you? It's in a variety of ways. And it's also housed, the ability to form new memories is housed in one small area of the brain that we've already identified called the hippocampus. And we can actually look at that on MRI year over year and watch it shrink or actually even regrow as a person's ability to form new memories changes. So it's very simple. But what we're seeing with the behavior of Joe Biden is not necessarily just a memory problem. It's more complicated. It's judgment, it's insight, it's judgment. These other functions of the brain that define a person's personality, that are much more difficult to measure because we don't even know where they originate in the brain, but they're coming from networks of different areas of the brain being able to communicate with each other. And so because it is a much more complicated function and it involves a much larger area of the brain, it's going to be the first to go. So you do start to see judgment and insight disappearing before you actually see people failing these dementia tests, which are much more about memory. Can you remember the series of words? Can you figure out how to count backwards from 7? It's much simpler from 100 by 7. Much simpler things.
Right. It's not, memory isn't quite as, or forming new memories isn't as interdependent on a whole network of other systems. Maybe a long-term, as you use a kind of associative or mnemonic, or just associative learning as you go back and back, and you attach an emotional thread to certain memories either way. Whatever. It gets built into a network or thought pattern, and it overlaps with other memories and experiences and philosophies and all that. But
So
just
testing it is going to be
the longer down the road, the more
testing it
sophisticated the memory.
objectively is very difficult.
Yeah. Got it.
Testing judgment and insight and these kinds of things is objectively, so we can come up with a number to say, oh, well, here's your judgment score, right? We don't have really
Well, can I just
a
ask
way to do
that?
that. So,
Can I
but the
make-
point I wanted to make about that is that really the best test is, do they seem like themselves?
Okay.
Right,
Oh!
so that because our brains are really
I'm
good.
sorry, do they seem to themselves like themselves, or do they over time also seem different to the people who know them best? Or
To the people around them.
people around.
Yes, because insight is part of the mental functioning.
Yeah.
And if you lose mental functioning and you lose your insight, you can't tell that you've lost mental function. I mean, it makes
Boy,
sense.
that's a horrible irony.
But so actually, so what happens, what we see
Maybe
happening
it's saving
first.
grace. You don't know you're losing it. You don't recognize it. The way
Well,
others do.
here's the thing. So you do it first, right?
Oh.
So what we see happen is a pattern that goes like this. The very first detector is the person themselves. They think, gee, I feel like I'm slipping.
Every time I just went to the fridge looking for my keys. I mean, I did really, but we've all had those moments where it's like, you go
Something that should, yeah, it's not just,
Right.
yeah, exactly. So, and they notice that happening a lot, or they notice that they just don't feel on the ball, probably. It's something, it's more like of a feeling. It's not like,
Yeah.
like I'm losing things, or again, that's to memory. It's more of a feeling, like I just don't,
fog.
I don't, yeah, brain fog, that's another way of describing it, which also relates to energy in the brain. So anyway, so that's the thing that happens first. And then once people continue progressing towards dementia, they actually lose that sense that they aren't themselves.
Got it. Okay.
Most people do. Like some people.
So stage one is I
maintain
just
it.
don't feel quite myself. Stage
Yeah.
two.
Stage two is everything's fine. What are you talking about? You're the problem, not me. And that's where they have like the judgment and the insight losses, and the family members are often really confused about what's actually if there's a problem at this point, because the person might seem very much like themselves, and because we rely so much on this idea that memory, right? That they can remember where where to go at a certain time. They can remember how they drive places, but they just
Don't tell me I'm demented. I know my social security number. Then why
yeah,
don't you just propose
they
to
make
the
some
cat?
weird statements. Well, it's not usually, that far off. It's more just like they don't seem like themselves. And it's very often hard for people to quantify it when they bring it to the doctor. And so that's where the frustrating thing that happens in these 7-minute visits that we have is the family member's really concerned. It's hard to bring it up. The patient is sitting there, and they've lost their insight, so they can't help. And so the family member's like, well, I don't think he's like really quite himself. And so a lot of doctors are going to be like, well, okay, just don't worry about it, right? Because they don't have time to assess it, and they don't know what to do about it anyway. And we get start to feel like this disconnection between the medical system being able to help us and our need to do something for our family member. And this is where stress comes in, a lot of caregiver stress, because
Yeah, of course.
they're
Well, let me ask you.
they
as a
feel like
question.
they
I
have
wanna
to
get back
watch.
to the presidents.
Oh, sure, sorry.
So he comes in. Biden. He's a patient, right?
Yes.
Can you? I got two quick questions. First one, before we go to that. Isn't it interesting? Sounds to me the way you're describing it, because you're not pretending to be a neurologist, and in fact, would it be the case that if someone came in and exhibited a number of key issues, let's say it's a Biden-type person,
Right.
and I can, I want to ask you what cues you picked up on, but if a Biden-like figure came in and was a patient coming in for something unrelated to dementia, cholesterol meds, for example, or Propecia, as Trump is on. Working great so far. Are there cues that are strong enough that if he were in your office, you might say, "Hey, listen, I might want to give you send you a neurologist just to make." You see where I'm going here.
I'm not sure what you're asking
If
about.
Biden
If
comes
it's
in
numbers
and
or is it
talks-
behavior? You're asking about behavior.
Oh,
Okay.
actually, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, this is me being a dummy. A combination of the numbers and his behavior. Yes.
Yes, and it is always, it's almost always a combination. It's almost always a combination, but also, of course, I always ask about diet, like, are you following a special diet? And if they've been avoiding fat or avoiding animal products, then, the animal products are the things that help us with cholesterol, even though our cells can make it. If we don't eat any of it, we're still just relatively more deprived all the time. So all of those things play a role in how much concern I'm going to have about somebody's mental state. But it's
if he comes in, though,
if Biden comes in,
we don't have to say, would you necessarily, I don't need, I mean, if you're uncomfortable, I don't want you to say, I would definitely ask him or bring up a neurologist.
to send him for cognitive testing.
Yeah. Would you be concerned is maybe a better question.
Yes, I would definitely be concerned.
Yeah.
So,
There were some tells in that little thing. What would you let's play Biden gaffes within that short thing we listened to. So you go first. What is one thing he did that made you go, ooh, wow?
well, the wrong word. Like he wasn't sure if he was going to be standing or sitting in a debate.
My turn. He drops words entirely. Or he goes, if I say you, I think he said. Ooh, I passed my memory.
And then inappropriate laughter. That's another.
Ooh, that was a good one. How about the dead stare, like he just got punched by Mike Tyson?
Yeah, I forget where that happened. But yeah, I mean the guy. I don't remember a lot of it, but I just
I got another one for you.
Okay.
How about going through mid-sentence and then hitting the eject button?
Yeah, not finishing sentences. Yes.
If I were to go to it, look. That's
Cutting yourself off.
Look.
Yeah.
Now, is that something? What does that represent? I forgot what I was saying.
Changing your thought midstream.
Oh yeah, thanks. Look. That was joking. So is that an inability to form up a thought and have the concentration to follow it through, or what goes wrong? I guess who knows?
There's a lot going on. I mean, see the neural networks, right? And so maybe he's trying to hide something. Maybe he doesn't know the answer. Maybe he forgot the question. There's a lot going on. But that's why it's just this general vague sense of, ooh, there's something wrong there, and that's very important, and we shouldn't ignore it. And it's almost more accurate than any kind of cognitive test, because people can do poorly on the cognitive testing sometimes for even though they can totally function, they have really good judgment, really good insight, they just were never really good at a certain thing, right? Like for example, it's just certain personalities have different, right?
Some people are just
well, it's almost becoming an IQ test at some point when the tests are so sophisticated to try to find some of these early things.
And Trump, who has all these standby Trump tropes, like fantastic, or speaking in staccato and a little, in little short bits of, it's and him being able to not give a damn when he's completely off the cuff and he goes, I like these lights more. I look less orange. I look less orange. Do you find some people with early onset, or any other cognitive impairment, possibly from severe head injury? I've had many, so I'm no genius. But if could one use humor as you're starting to somehow detect that maybe you're a little off? Can you have you seen patients in the past make little goofs about
well, people who use humor a lot anyway will definitely tend to continue that trend as they lose cognitive function as much as they possibly can use it, and very often they probably have noticed that they could get away with things with humor. So it's that same kind of mental state. Right. Just try to make a joke and people won't notice.
But I don't want to miss the camel in the room because I want you to win this game with Biden gaffes. And by the way, like I said, watching Trump the way he is, I think it's funny as hell. But there's something about Biden, because we know there's a chance that all of us, especially on this vegetable diet, people are living on. Not us, but no one wants to be not knowing who they are, not knowing where they are as Biden. He thought he was in Vermont, it's in New Hampshire, Biden, it's a state of mind. But the camel in the room, remember, there's one more gaffe toward the end there. That's a linguistic gaffe. Remember? You couldn't punch through what word?
I don't remember.
I think it was function.
cognitive
Okay.
function.
Oh, the test. Talking about the test itself.
No, as he was speaking, he said, "We can talk all the time you want. The American people will judge us."
Oh, like he couldn't finish the word. Right. Yes.
And he took another running start at it.
Right,
You know, it's
right.
like it's pole vaulter, right? He
Yes.
didn't quite make it over the pole the first time. That's a tall word function. So
Right.
he went back about 400 feet, ran as fast as he could, couldn't get it over again. Is that something you see with patients? Is that?
Oh, absolutely. When they've had pretty advanced cognitive decline, and even certainly with dementia, quite often, because it's an area that completing word is called prosody, right? Or how smoothly do you string words together in a sentence, and that's mediated by an area in the left temporal lobe of your brain, by your ear, sort of. And so, when somebody has kind of a global decline, like I think is what's going on with Biden. I don't think he had a stroke or anything like that. Then you can get a little bit of dysfunction in every single mental capacity, including prosody. So it's not just one function that he's losing. But actually, he did actually have, I don't know if you remember, but he had an aneurysm in the late 90s, early 2000s, and he had it repaired. Yeah, and
Why did I forget that? Why isn't that being brought up? Is that
people who don't want to talk about it, I guess. But yeah, that certainly doesn't help because
What's an aneurysm?
An aneurysm is a weakness of a blood vessel.
Like a balloon that pops or something.
Yeah, it's a weakness of a blood vessel, and so that there was bleeding into his brain, and they actually had to do a surgical repair of the aneurysm, and he has another aneurysm that's stable, right? So it hasn't bled yet, and he's kind of in bad shape because he also has something called atrial fibrillation, and atrial fibrillation is it's a condition where the atrium of your heart fibrillates, meaning it doesn't have a real full-on squeeze.
Yeah.
It just wibbles around, and so it never fully empties, and that allows blood to potentially clot in there, which can cause strokes. It can cause those vascular strokes, right? And normally people have to be put on a blood thinner, but he can't be because he had this bleeding aneurysm.
Oh my God.
So, and even more endangerment to his health, he has a history of a deep vein thrombosis. So he's prone to getting blood clots in his legs. And if you have a blood clot in your leg that breaks off and travels to your lungs, that's called a pulmonary embolism, and that can hurt and kill you, actually. It's so
Plotting things in the news with SARS.
yes, exactly, because of the he has chronic low-grade inflammation causing clots, causing inflammation in his brain, possibly eroding the integrity of his arteries and contributing to the aneurysms, although you can be born with a susceptibility to that as well, and certainly destroying the gray matter in his brain so that he just doesn't have the ability to cognitively function. Yeah, I'm sure if we were to do a scan of his brain, a good MRI scan and a high 3 Tesla, or now they have 7 Tesla, we would see all kinds of findings in there, where there would be probably some shrinkage or atrophy notable. There could be some, an area of an infarct from the atrial fibrillation. There could be some permanent damage from the aneurysm that bled, and there could also be evidence of microinfarcts from the lack of energy.
That's an energy deficit.
An energy deficit, in a larger, having more consequences.
Infarction being a small
stroke, basically. Yeah.
Goodness gracious me.
Yeah. So
you're worried for our Mr.
I wouldn't
Biden.
think he'd be able to make it to the end of 4 years and be in any way like
Of course we
suitable
want him to be healthy.
to. I mean, no, but I mean, of course, I'm not saying that I think he should be taken out at all. I'm saying that I would not want him in a room, where anything he says matters at the end of 4 years, because I just don't think. I don't think he'll be appropriate. I think he will be wildly inappropriate, in 4 years, because there's been a pretty big difference in just the past year to now.
Yes.
And don't forget that being stressful, being the president is stressful and deprives people.
can be an exacerbator of Alzheimer's.
Yes, and lack of sleep can too.
In
So,
fact, that's one of the things you would recommend as a doctor. Try to avoid stress, get plenty of sleep, and obviously like hell off those damn poisonous
Yes.
oils as in yesterday.
I wanted to talk about Obama's blood results.
Oh yeah, definitely. Let's do that. But let me just ask you one thing first, or just make something clear. You certainly would accept you enjoy and welcome a neurologist take on all this as well. But you as a physician, aren't you I'm sorry, as a family
Primary care.
aren't you one of the frontline people who are the first to see, who would bring up?
Yeah, we're supposed to be screening for this kind of thing, by asking family
It's
members.
not like
Of course, we don't always have time to do that, right? How are we going to do that? Right. Well, no, some people do. Some people say, I feel like I have, when they're in that I notice I have a problem state, they very often just go to a
But
neurologist.
you've had, I'm sure many times, a family member either coming in with the patient, in question.
More often than not, yes. More often than
them
not.
first, and then you would like.
Then it's this whole awkward, conversation of, because that very often at that point, the patient is in the lack of insight phase, where they can be fairly dysfunctional and it doesn't register.
Right.
So-
it's just
So you have competing agendas here.
I
where-
understand. But my question is, they come in, dad seems not on it.
Well, that's a big deal because it's tough to navigate, and
When they have helping agendas.
yeah, and if you're the primary doctor, you have to be able to delicately communicate a lot of stuff
if
here.
you're someone running for president, to bring it back to that, it's very possible that the yes men and women
That Biden is surrounded by, and that no one has said anything.
or said
It's
it
very
another way.
possible.
It's like, no, you really got to hear me. And I was Dr. Kate. I saw her on Bill Maher, and I think you need to get off the vegetable oil now. Well, I'll ask you about that later about if there's anything, if this is hopeless, or if you got off vegetable oil, if what the hopeful outcome would be. But just to get an answer to my original question, someone comes in, dad seems off, he's willing to follow through. Next step, what? Neurologist, I would guess.
It's
Or
not necessarily, honestly. So it depends if they're willing to change their diet, right? Because
It's not always straight
because we don't have treatment for it, right? So it really comes down to diet. And in fact, one of the things I wanted to bring up is that we have drugs for dementia, but they don't really do much other than make people less anxious. Okay, that's my opinion of them. If they were effective for dementia, you could argue that they would logically, therefore, be even more effective for mild cognitive decline. But they are so ineffective for mild cognitive decline that in 2018, the guidelines on treatment of mild cognitive impairment published in the American Academy of Neurology said that doctors are duty-bound to inform our patients that there is no evidence that any drugs work before, like, say they insist, right? Say that the patient is like, I read that Aricept or whatever can help me with my cognitive function, and I feel like, I want to do that. The doctors have to say, well, there's no evidence that this thing is actually going to help you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So the only thing that there is actual official evidence on that actually helps is exercise. And of course, obviously they're not looking for vegetable oils.
At all. So you would recommend to him get on that before you start really slipping, Biden style. So get off the oils. Both
Yes, if you were my patient, yes.
So the magic. So reduce stress. Get as much sleep as you can. Get the hell off the oils. I don't know why I put that on number 3. It should have been number 1. And then exercise.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So you want to talk about
Get a nutrient-rich diet.
speaking of exercise. So
Nutrient-rich diet and antioxidants. Those are the other 2 things I would add.
So
Now,
you said nutrient dense, meaning including nutrient healthy fats and cholesterol from healthy
Yes.
sources.
and all the other things that we need in order to control inflammation more effectively.
And you've written books on that.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about
Obama's blood test. So Obama famously, I think, is among perhaps the most intelligent presidents. I think they've talked about this, like his IQ might be higher than any other president we've had, or at least in recent years. But anyway, so his HDL and triglyceride ratio are pretty stellar, and he's not on any cholesterol lowering medications, unlike the other 3 people we've talked about here. Just goes to show you. But so his triglycerides are 42, which is lower than his HDL, which was 68. And so when I'm looking at these numbers, I like to see the HDL and triglycerides being equal to each other, or the HDL being higher than the triglycerides, like he has here, and the HDL being over 60. So he hits all of those naturally. And his fasting blood sugar is also excellent. His vitamin D level was a tiny bit low, even though he was supplementing with vitamin D. And we don't have any, and his weight and height and his blood pressure was fantastic, 110 over 68. Now that's a normal blood pressure. His resting heart rate was an excellent 56. Less than 60 is a sign of excellent health. And again, not on any medications for blood pressure or that would slow his heart rate.
And I mean, you make this sound like, you're the ones, you look at this entirely different than everyone else. But when you describe in very simple terms, when I see high blood pressure, I'm not, yes, I don't want the high blood pressure, but I'm thinking,
I don't whip out the prescription pad and say, oh, there we go, we fixed the problem.
And you're thinking, what caused that? When you see overweight, you don't think, let's get the weight off so we can treat the metabolism. You go, let's treat the metabolism with insulin resistance.
Right.
So when you see this is a poster child picture of exactly the correlation that you're describing. Based on all the numbers, you would expect really good other stuff.
And based on this, so this was done in 2016. So based on this, if he continues to do the same things diet-wise and everything else-wise, I would anticipate that cognitively he remains
we have
sharp.
ex-President Obama on the phone to talk about this.
Wow. Okay, let's bring him on.
Hello, Kate. I don't know how to do Obama very well. I know I was president, and I played Obama, but my impersonation of myself still seems some odd mixture of Obama and Captain Kirk. But my question to you, Doctor, is this. All I eat is vegetable oil. Every day, all day. Do you believe it?
No.
Why not?
Because your numbers are too good, and when you talk in full sentences and you're not trying to do an impersonation of yourself, you make a lot of sense. I don't always agree with everything you say, but at least you can make sense.
Well, I tell you what, I got a question for you. If these two fine gentlemen, and I'm talking about my friend Trump, and of course my vice president, what's your recommendation? And can they see any improvement over time if they finally start to eat more like me? And by the way, put the garden back. Thank you, Dr. Kate. I'll take my answer after. I'm going to go have a smoke.
Well, it was great chatting with you, Obama. Hopefully you'll work on your impersonation of yourself.
Oh, and by the way,
for the next time.
I have the best golf swing among everyone that's been talked about today.
I would have.
And the best singing.
I guess that's good. I don't know. Okay. Wow.
Well,
it's really been an honor to talk to you. And you're not full of yourself at all, are you?
I'm a good dancer. And the comedy stuff that I did at the press center when I made fun of Trump, and I'm pretty good at that too.
Yeah. Go quit your day job, whatever that is.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Kate. You're a treasure. See you later.
Okay, so let's bring Luke back so we can make commentary on that commentary.
Was that Obama?
Yes, of course it was. So what can Biden expect if he does everything, gets on a deep nutrition diet starting today? He definitely will stop declining. Okay, that's very important. Yes, he will definitely stop declining. It does make that much of a difference. Well, will we see any improvement? Well, we potentially will see some improvement in things like stamina and attention span, things that relate to blood flow and energy production.
It's funny when you say blood flow. I guarantee the first, what every man thinks of first. They don't think brain. But guess what the biggest sexual organ in the body really is?
The brain.
Nope, it's your genitals. But number two.
Wow, those are some giant genitals.
No, they say the brain. But it's funny how men, you know, if there was Viagra for the brain, if you called it Viagra for the brain, people would be like, well, as long as it's Viagra, I'm in. But when I think men are more afraid of losing one function than the other function. They'd rather be, not know their name, but still be able to, than wait, what? I don't think they care if they get through a sentence. I think they want to get through the bedroom door.
Sure. More. I mean, that's where it's always the dance between trying to figure out what it is that the person, how you're going to reach somebody, how are you going to say something to them that means something to them in terms of their health. Because
is there a relationship between your not working as well as you'd like, your thing,
and your diet? Of course there is.
And your brain not getting enough. When you said
absolutely. Absolutely. It's mediated by this thing called endothelial function, which is in turn driven by these molecules called nitric oxide that you're constantly being produced. Yeah, so nitric oxide helps you produce. Viagra helps your nitric oxide get produced more, hang around longer, and vegetable oil. It blocks it reacts with nitric oxide, so it's like you didn't produce any.
And we brought this up before.
And so it means that you can't regulate blood flow very well, and it also means your Viagra won't work as well. Right.
Yeah. Right.
So even if you have damage from vegetable oil, if you stop eating more vegetable oil, your Viagra will work better.
If you stop eating
more vegetable oil. Right. Even if you have vascular damage.
Why would you stop? What do you mean stop eating more? You mean stop eating?
If you stop eating vegetable oil starting today, and any more vegetable oil. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So when you have generally it is a real concern if you need Viagra. It's like, well, your brain does, but we don't have that yet.
Right.
So let's talk about fighting for energy and doing whatever it can to. And luckily, the brain, unlike that, will take great measures. Like you said, the liver and the brain. If you fall off a boat in freezing water and they pull you out 20 minutes later and revive you, why? Because what does the body do in distress? Saves the brain, right? It's always number one. But so the brain takes all these protective measures. Is the canary in the coal mine for what could be going on later on, or is going on.
Absolutely. But there is a kind of Viagra for the brain. That would be exogenous ketones or taking ketone supplements, because
I love that.
The brain's
so if you're going keto, you're taking Viagra for the brain.
Well, yeah, but you don't even have to follow a keto diet. You can take the exogenous ketones. You can just buy them from Amazon.
And you don't. And by the way, just as an aside, you don't have to go full on zero carb blah 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 to get the benefits of keto. But that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they could get better. I'm surprised to hear you say that. You wouldn't be surprised. So you wouldn't be surprised if he continues on a vegetable oil-based diet, which he likely is. I pretty much guarantee it. You almost guarantee it based on, you'd be shocked.
Based on his numbers, and exactly.
You'd be shocked if he gave you a call tomorrow.
He cut off vegetable oil.
I haven't had vegetable oil
2 years ago.
For 5 years. What are you talking about? You'd be like, liar.
Yeah, I wouldn't believe it.
And so he's on vegetable oil. We're saying, just about certain. And within 4 years, if he continues, things are getting worse cognitively. And if he stops now, this is the part that surprises me. You're saying, I wouldn't be surprised if we did see a halting of the progression.
Oh yeah, we would see he would stabilize. Because what would be making him worse? There has to be more oxidation. Right. Okay. No. So that's a really yes. Definitely, our brains do change as we age, but they don't. Oxidation is not part of normal.
They don't have oxidation, so this is kind of lost. So you can, on a good diet, you can and should.
There's something really cool that happens as we age, and that is that the close connections in the brain. When we're born, we have a lot more brain cells, and they're much more closely connected. And as we age, as we learn, we develop networks where there's progressively more and more distant connections. And as we age, the distant connections kind of become dominant, and the close connections are sacrificed almost. And so that's kind of like wisdom, right? You have this ability to see things that you couldn't comprehend as a young person. But you certainly also do. It is almost part of normal aging to have some word finding or word substitution difficulties. So that's why you can't just take a look at, somebody speaking and having a little bit of difficulty expressing themselves when it's a difficult topic, and saying that, oh my gosh, they're demented or they're worse than they were. It's a much more global assessment, and the judgment and insight and executive functioning are much more important indicators, because the mind of somebody in this part of their life, 70, 80, 90 years old, is different than it was 20, 30 years ago. And I feel like we kind of sacrifice some of the acuity of word finding and so on for what is supposed to be wisdom from these longer connections.
So occasionally hunting for a word or word substitution, like you said. Like David Sedaris has this great thing from Me Talk Pretty one day, where he couldn't say S's.
Right.
So his speech therapist is like, so what are you going to do for Christmas? And he says, well, while we, I'm trying to find a word without an S in it. But anyway,
on holiday.
Yeah, on holiday, we're going to put up the pine tree, and open a present or two, or open our gifts. Oh, good luck avoiding S's. God, it's harder than I thought. But
well, maybe when you were 10, you could have done a better job.
But you're saying it's a constellation of so-called gaffes or tells is more required than simply, looking to hunt for a word. That's not enough.
Right.
But we're seeing with Biden, I mean, everyone's seeing the same thing here. It's not a coincidence that all of America is like, what the hell's going on with this guy?
Yes, he looks like he's not doing well and doesn't know where he is, and that just that sense of that, there's something wrong with this guy's head, is, like I was saying, is probably a very accurate test.
Yeah. Wow. Well, he said himself, the test. Hey, I'm not taking the test. The test is life.
Yeah, that was true. I agree with that.
Dude.
Yeah.
What are you on crack or something?
I think it might be interesting just to point out that Bill Clinton, this is a blood test that he took in the early 2000s. His HDL was less than his triglycerides, and it was 46. Okay. So his triglycerides were 52, which were excellent, and at this point in time he was on cholesterol pills. But by the test of what I look for is, I want your HDL to be more than your triglycerides. I want it to be more than 60. So he fails both of those, and so I'm not surprised.
Not 60. What was it?
His HDL was 46.
46. You want it to be at least 50.
I want it to be at least 60.
Yeah. Six? Oh,
yeah. For somebody to have a good cognitive outlook.
Oh.
And ideal metabolism.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So you're not liking those numbers. And
and this was back in 2000, and so I'm not surprised that he's yes, and so I don't think it can all be blamed on the bypass.
Right. Oh, that's right. But combination. So all the things going on with say, President Biden, or running for President, Vice President Biden, there's a constellation of threats and injury and metabolic distress that I mean, he's under a firestorm of threats to the gray matter. And some of few we can't do much about, as you said, if you've got the embolism sitting there waiting to pop, it's not loaded up on a blood thinner. You need that to get the fibrillation, which is letting heart coagulate and turn into a little mini strokes. And oh my God, imagine being in his position.
Right.
But there's something because you're painting a picture of an incredible tragedy here. Yes, as a physician, you're like, okay, I get it. My skills are limited here. Like Superman with it. I couldn't save all my powers. You couldn't save. You can't fix all that.
You can't reverse time.
Right. You can't fix the embolism. But there's a tragedy in that. Wait a second. He has access to. He could. There's no reason. As you said earlier, as we were talking today, the rich, whether they know it or not, even though they could go to a 3-star Thomas Keller restaurant, just north of Napa in Yountville, and pay $600. they're gonna be exposed. It's the one ingredient I bet you. If you know, we actually interviewed him while we were in Napa. I should have said, is there any ingredient that you're not proud of? Because he's very resourceful.
Right.
But you point to that bottle of canola and you go, are you proud of that? Have you ever met? You know where that's made? You want to go to the factory? Check it out. And you're paying. So the rich generally though.
Right.
Generally, are less.
Yes, I mean Biden has no excuse to not be able to make a change, but the excuse is that he's not given the right information, right? So there's too many people out there.
You were just on Bill Maher.
Well, there's other people like actually one of the things. Who? What? No, I was going to talk about this Dr. McDougall here, who has a center in Napa Valley and who's commenting on Bill Clinton's madness, and he's laying it all on the consequence of the heart bypass surgery, brain damage, and he is rightfully kind of getting up in arms about the fact that doctors don't notify our patients before they're going to undergo bypass that it could dramatically impair their cognitive functioning. But he's laying it all really heavily only at the feet of cognitive functioning because Bill Clinton's cognitive decline at the feet of the bypass, the pump head, or bypass brain, because he's got an agenda here. He is plant strong, right? Or he's not cholesterol strong. He's cholesterol weak. Because and so that means that like he can't, because Bill Clinton has been in the news many times for being on a plant-based diet and having good cholesterol numbers. He can't accept. He's got to downplay that. What I think is a reality is that the plant strong diet does not help somebody's cognitive function unless,
or at least we've run the experiment
unless they're focused on eliminating vegetable oils.
And that would be the.
I mean, God knows we don't. You know, we're not.
And you have to have a lot of willpower because the high starch diet.
Right.
Plant strong diets tend to be high starch and starchiness. Starchy foods tend to make you a little hungry.
Antioxidant rich, plants and all that.
Right.
Liver, of course, from a cow that didn't come out of a cow.
Right. That's a whole different topic.
But there's all kinds of things you can do, even on a plant. Entirely plant-based diet, that staying away from vegetable, number one. But we did run the experiment here, and so you're sure, based on his decline, that was not part of the mix for him avoiding vegetable oil. How do we know? Because he changed his diet, made no mention of avoiding vegetable oil.
Right.
The plant-strong guy here, no doubt says, watch this.
And his cholesterol levels are very low. I think what is it here? Well, this was back in 2000 before he was put on.
But it should be, my point is, if you put him on the plant stuff, if the guy should be able to say, he's going to be knocked down from this bypass.
Right.
But now I got him on plants only. Right? Watch this guy spring back.
Flourish.
Watch in a year. He's kicking ass. And watch over the next decade and a half, as long as he sticks to my McDougall plant-based diet, watch this guy continue to be the sharpest tack in the room.
Right.
Not what happened. So that's an experiment that didn't work out.
Right.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get to the end of the show here. Is there? I mean, this is. It's quite a tragedy. It's one thing to see a guy really struggling and looking like he's not really sure where he is, and making up, and like you said, not just memory stuff, not just word replacement, but other clear, all pointing to different cognitive processes that are failing him, which is kind of an X-ray of how many cognitive processes really required while we're just talking about the subject. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Yes.
So, but that in and of itself is tragic. To see a guy struggle like that. But to know that today he's going to go and the Alzheimer's is in his head. If we're not saying it's Alzheimer's, but I'm sorry I said that. Whatever's going on.
Well, I am saying he has cognitive
He
impairment.
seems to have cognitive. He certainly appears to have stuff. And you would run a battery test. You would bring a neurologist. You would do a whole bunch of.
I would bring in the people who do these tests. There's actually the neurologists don't do the tests. There's therapists that specialize in properly doing these tests because they're difficult to administer properly.
Oh, very good. Okay.
Complicated.
The tragedy of seeing him struggle like that, and to know, A, it could be totally prevented. B, could have been prevented. B, could now be stopped.
Yeah. Well, yes, I mean, when I look at exactly, and the whole picture just screams this guy's been consuming vegetable oils, because atrial fibrillation in and of itself doesn't occur unless the person is on way too much vegetable oils, or has been at some point in their life. That's my opinion, because
In your experience.
yes, in my experience, yeah, it's because the heart doesn't do well when it doesn't get fat. The heart is the ultimate aerobic organ when it doesn't get fat for fuel.
Receive fat for fuel.
Yes.
Just want to make sure people
Right.
get fat.
In the arteries or become
But
fat.
receive
Yeah.
the right kind of fat. Because
Right.
I mean, hey, you say to somebody, your heart needs to receive the right kinds of fats. I mean, my first thought, based on what I heard for the first several centuries, several decades of my life, my thought is, I don't want to throw a bunch of fat at my heart. Are you crazy?
Right.
But
But it is the ultimate cardiac organ, and the best fuel for it is body fat, or stable fats. And the other thing that's an indicator that Biden has, he's just in this hyperinflammatory state, is the fact that he's had a blood clot, at least one, that was severe enough to land him in the hospital and have him be on a blood thinner. And blood clotting is also a result of inflammation, and the kinds of fatty acids, the linoleic acid in vegetable oils, seed oils, promote platelet clotting,
and God forbid,
which is why we're seeing this in the coronavirus.
I was just going to get to that. God forbid. We have this knife edge pop situation with all these hyperinflammatory processes when somebody's already suffered injuries from these that now are leaning into each other like a house of cards. And a strong wind can come and blow that house of cards over, and that strong wind for Biden, again, God forbid for Trump, God forbid for everybody. But you mix COVID and in a vegetable oil laden dude who's already set up for hyperinflammatory response, here comes COVID on top of all this other stuff, and COVID being associated with cognitive decline all by itself. I mean, get off these damn oils, Joe. Hey, Joe. Get off the seed oils. All right.
Sounds good.
But he seems like a nice enough guy.
A little.
Well, yeah. Who knows? Anyway, so this isn't a political show.
No, but we want everyone to be healthy,
Well, thanks for listening. I guess that's the end of the show, because we made all the points.
Do you want to do a cool wrap up or something?
The wrap up is thanks for listening. Do.
Okay, I like that.
Wow.